Tying numbers to animation might seem like a daunting task, but let me show you how to tame those numbers with some small, rather simplistic expression modifications. Let's go ahead and look at our project. If I grab the current time indicator and scrub, you'll see that these columns animate from 0 up to whatever their final values are. Now, I want to animate a number over this 2010 snow year column. Now, to get the value for the number, I'm going to navigate to my exercise files, and in the Assets folder, under the 01 CSV folder, if I click on the Snowfall Boulder CSV and just preview it, you can see for the snow year 2010, the value was 138 inches. Okay, so I'll just hide that and jump back over here to After Effects. Now I want this number 138 to actually animate based on this line moving up and down. So let's select Layer 2 and press U on the keyboard to see its keyframes. Let's make sure we've positioned our current time indicator over this second keyframe. Now let's grab our text tool here and then hover over top of the column and just click and add a number 138. I'll grab my selection tool to set the number and then reposition it just so it's sitting over top of my column. Notice the font I chose was Arial Bold at a size of 100 pixels. You can choose whatever style and size font you like. This is going to work for me. So if we open up the options for Layer 2, under the text options, we do have the ability to keyframe source text. The problem is this: if I were to add these keyframes, they would be hold keyframes. So if I set a keyframe at 138 here and then move back to the beginning and set another keyframe at 0, it would just stay at 0 until it gets to the second keyframe. We need to create an expression to make these numbers actually count. So what I'm going to do is scroll down in my timeline so I can see this second keyframe, and I'll move my current time indicator down to that keyframe. Now, with Layer 2 selected, let's go up under Effect and go down to Expression Controls and add a slider control. Now, the slider value, I want to go ahead and set that to 138 and press Return. Now, this is not linked to this number. If I go ahead and change this number, nothing's going to happen. So let me just Command-Z or Control-Z on Windows to undo. So I want this source text to be driven by this slider control. So I'm going to hold down Option on the Mac or Alt on Windows and click on the source text stopwatch. Then I can actually use the pick whip that pops up here. I'll click on it and point it right up at the slider control up here. So when I let go, notice it's saying it's going to look at the Effect Slider Control slider. So if I just click outside of this scripting area, now any change I make to my slider, it's actually going to update the number. Let me Command-Z to undo that. So let's add a keyframe to our slider here at 1 second. And let's move back to the beginning of our timeline and add a second keyframe just by changing the slider value to 0. Now as we scrub through, you can see the numbers counting, but I've got two issues. The first of which is the fact that I actually have decimal points. So what I need to do is round the text, and I can do this with a script. So here in the timeline, I'm going to click on my expression. That'll get me up so I can actually edit the expression. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on the left side, and I'm going to type a capital M-A-T-H for math, and I'll type dot round, R-O-U-N-D, and then I'll use this left bracket or left paren, which is just above the number 9 key. And then I'll go all the way to the end of my expression, and I'll go ahead and use that right bracket or right paren. So here you can see I've now framed the Effect Slider Control, and everything that's in there is going to be rounded. So now when I click outside of the expression, now as I scrub, you can see each of the individual numbers are set at a nice round even number. You would think we're almost done, but there are two little things I want to adjust. If we go up to our slider control and expand the options here, notice the slider only goes up to a value of 100, and ours is currently outside of that value. You can go ahead and actually just right-click on the word slider, and if you choose Edit Value, you get options for the slider range. So here, let's change the range to a maximum of 150. Now when I click OK, you can see my slider is not all the way at the end. So that's one thing. But the other thing that's troubling me is the fact that this isn't moving at the same speed, or it's not changing numbers at the same speed changes that are happening within this scale outline. So what I'm going to do is collapse my options for layer 2, and I'll select layer 3 and actually click on the word scale so those keyframes are highlighted. Now I'm going to go ahead and select layer 2 and I'll press U to show me those keyframes. Now what I need to do is actually draw a lasso around all the keyframes so they're all selected. And if I open my graph editor here, you can see I've got square keyframes and then this cool smooth point. And they're all color coded, so I can see this white outline scale value. This is the green value. So let me jump out of the graph editor. What I want to do is just select these two keyframes by drawing a lasso around them, and I'll press F9 on my keyboard. I could also go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. Now let's draw a lasso around these 4 keyframes again and open up the keyframe editor. So in here, I want to go ahead and just click this right keyframe, this pink one, and I'll drag it to the left until I can kind of match this initial curve. Then I'll grab this other handle and drag it towards the right. So now I've got a rough match for the change of my numbers, and it'll match based on the speed at which this white outline is changing. So let's jump out of the graph editor, and I'll go ahead and just preview the animation. And here you can see it speeds up and slows down accordingly. And we have nice round numbers that are being interpolated between these two keyframes because we actually used a slider controller to control the value of the source text.